As we move more and more from the traditional castle and fort analogy, where all our applications sit on premise, protected by firewalls and protected by IDS and IPS and various different levels of technology and load balancing, etc., we're seeing a little bit of a shift towards maybe hybrid infrastructures where some of the technology actually still remains on premise because of the legacy nature of the application and the requirements of a fast high speed network, and also containing that information into a controllable data center. And that might be for a number of reasons. That might be privacy, that might be compliance, or that might just be down to the general commercial sensitivity of the information there. But as we move towards a hybrid infrastructure, what we've got to do is focus a little bit more on how do we provide access into those infrastructures whilst retaining the traditional control that we had with on-premise infrastructure. So that might be transforming from a physical firewall, for instance, into a virtual firewall, but using the same technology from Cisco to actually protect it with a known good configuration that you maybe would apply to an on-premise solution. So there's various things that can be done there. Some of the other things to consider as well is when you move them from the traditional areas of the network and into the cloud, what additional implications do we have in terms of information security? Where does that data actually sit? Are we allowed to place that data in that cloud? And how do we secure that data at rest, in motion? And while that data is being consumed, how do we effectively ensure that only the people that are authorized to get access to those information assets can do so? We're seeing a little bit of a trend that when people are moving or adopting into cloud infrastructures very, very quickly, usernames and passwords are the first things that are used. They're simple, it's straightforward. But studies have actually shown that, as you know, from a human psychology point of view, we probably use between 6 to 8 passwords in our lives, and we tend to repeat them. And repeat them everywhere. And you know, I spend a hell of a lot of time working with my customers and a hell of a lot of time working with the team back at Nowcom to make sure that we try and change that behavior. A username and password is not necessarily secure. There are things you can do to make a password more secure, and you know, we have various technologies available to help you achieve that. But first of all, we've got to try and change the hearts and minds and let people understand the impacts of having insecure passwords. So one of those impacts, I guess, is if you're using the same password everywhere. We're all trying to get our shopping now at the moment all online, so we don't have to go out to the stores. But do we use that same password everywhere? Do we use that same password to log into work? And if so, once that password's been compromised, how do we think that actors or attackers out there are going to use those passwords? We've seen it quite common that the passwords that people use are repeated everywhere, and those credentials are actually taken, sold on the dark web to the highest bidder. So what's the impact? You know, what are people going to do with my credentials, I hear you ask? Well, they could open a bank account in your name. They could access your bank account if indeed you bank with an organisation that doesn't support you two-factor. They could buy things on your behalf, or they could actually access the organisation's infrastructure that you work for. And as a result of that, well, we really don't want to imagine what could happen. So one of the important things is to actually understand that passwords are important. Understand that we need rules, because we're human, aren't we? We can't remember everything, so there's various tools you might be able to use to remember passwords. Some people use password managers, other people use passphrases, and rather than just using dictionary words, they may actually mix things up a little bit to give people a bit more chance. The other area that we need to look at, and very important, is that a password alone is maybe not strong enough, despite the fact that we've got some password complexity in there. Technology is moving so fast now, we can see more and more and more mathematical computational power in clouds. So people will actually be using this mathematical computational power to hack passwords. And you know, with the advent of quantum computing, I think we're almost at the point where you know, even very, very strong passwords can be compromised. So the simple thing to do to help with that when you're moving to the cloud is to consider whether two-factor authentication is available with your cloud provider. Two-factor can come in free forms or can come in paid for forms, and of course, like everything in life, you get very much what you pay for. We use two-factor from Cisco with a product called Duo, and Duo enables us to take our cloud security to another level. It enables us not only to secure our secondary levels of authentication and primary levels of authentication and federate maybe with on-premise domain controllers or with Azure Active Directory, but also apply different policies depending on where you're coming from, where the request's actually coming from. So as you can imagine, you can provide yourself or as an organization with some additional reassurance in terms that you're only ever going to allow access, for instance, from the UK. The other things we can talk about is around posturing of the endpoints themselves. So when we're consuming applications from home, should we have the same rights when we're at home as we do when we're in the office? Should we have the same rights if we are on a work device against whether we're on a bring your own device? Who knows? That's a policy really that only an organisation can make, and a lot of forward-thinking organisations are providing BYOD policies, but once the organisation's staff starts to realise that their assets then going to have software on it, they get a little bit twitchy about what additional information you're going to glean on their personal device. So culturally, we might switch away from that natural selection to use our own device and more towards a company-owned device. So these are a few things that we need to consider when we're working with cloud technologies. There's lots more, but please have a read of our article. Please comment feedback, let us know what you think. And if you find these videos useful, we'll be doing more of those to help you know, enhance everyone's understanding of the security solutions that are out there and make us all more secure when we're working from home.